Wish you could fund 25 plus files a month, but not do any of the client calls or chase documents. I'm willing to bet most of you listening would be like, that sounds fantastic, Scott. This week's guest, Dion Beg, has done exactly that. So Dion's a friend of mine who built a very successful mortgage business focusing on the investor client niche. And so in this conversation, we talk about that niche, and it was extremely profitable. One point he's up to 190 million a year, probably finishes year 80 to 100 million. And how he's had to adapt and pivot his niche over the last couple of years, given the market that we're in. And then I get into asking him how he structured his business. And this is the part that, man, I got to tell you, I get excited about podcasts. This is what I'm excited about. And you are not going to want to skip this one. He talks about how he structured his business, and he spends the vast majority of his time just doing the marketing and then supporting his team and not talking to the clients and not doing the document chasing. And for some of you, you're like, oh my gosh, Scott, if I could do that, I'd be in heaven. I love driving business to my team. I just don't want to do it all anymore. And Dion has figured out how to do that. And I get into the weeds, ask him specifically how he did it. I think you're going to love this conversation I have with Dion. Hey, I'm Scott Beckford. This is the I Love Mortgage Brokering podcast, the number one podcast for mortgage brokers to learn how to scale up their business. One of the things I believe is that there's no problem in your business someone else hasn't already solved. Yeah, your problem is who's got the answer. This is one of the best episodes for helping you understand how to structure a team that lets you scale. And I just absolutely love this conversation. Have a listen, and then I'll be back when we're done. Hey, Dion, welcome back to the podcast.
This is the first time on, man. You thought I was here before. This is my very first time.
No, I can't. It's unbelievable.
We've done lots of conversations, but not this podcast. Yeah.
And we've done training stuff together, and it's funny that we've not done a podcast. So first, maybe tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got in the mortgage biz before we get into. I got a lot of things I want to chat with you about.
Yeah, sure. So I landed in Canada in 2008 from Australia. And in Australia, I was a financial advisor and a realtor. And when I came to Canada, I said, okay, I want to get back into that industry. But all of those other licenses, financial planning or real estate, took a lot longer. I said, okay, let me just try mortgage brokering for a period of time, and I'll move back into real estate sales. That's really how I entered mortgage brokering. But then I realized that if I was able to systemize and hit certain volumes, then I could hit my goal, which was a financial goal, at the same time actually live a life where I didn't have to work evenings and weekends. And so I built my business to really kind of serve that lifestyle. But it's also been built on that financial background, using real estate as a tool for creation of wealth. In our business now, we try and look after our clients over 4 big things, which is first home, getting debt-free, setting up their kids, and setting up their retirement. So I figured early, if we can just be the guys who solve those big problems that everybody has, or most everybody has, then that's the way we run our business, and that's how we serve people.
I love that for the 4 things are first home, debt free, setting up kids, setting up retirement, and it's in language that actually matters for the customer. Like too often we put things in our language, but you're brilliant at that stuff. So you it's funny that you just chose to be a mortgage broker. I mean, you were in Ontario, so I mean, I don't know what it was like when you did it, but of course it's not difficult to become a mortgage broker. So, but then you realize actually this is a good gig if you can figure it out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, look, yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, historically, the bar has been low. It means that, some of our fellow brokers may not have the same aptitude as others. And, unfortunately, that sometimes gives our industry a bit of a rough name. But our job is to just be the best we can. And, thankfully, we've found our niche. We've found some great clients who we've worked with for many years. Life's been good. Business has been good.
I do want to talk about building a niche or a niche. And I think the Americans call it niche. And I like niche because you can say you've been niche slapped, which sounds really awesome. If you say niche slapped, it sounds, I don't know, it doesn't sound that good. But you changed your company name. So, because you were Dion Beg Mortgages. So talk to me about talk to me about that. And we'll get into this niche stuff too.
Yeah, sure. So like every salesperson, you build your brand on your name, which is what I did for the first good 12 years in the business. And then I realized that, as I built my business, and my model is a little different from others, but as I built it, I didn't want to become the bottleneck or the only person that a person would want to speak with. And that's the challenge. Like, you want to build up your name, especially early in the business. You want to build up your reputation, but you can't answer 16 hours worth of calls in an 8-hour day. So that's when you have to hire. And that's where I decided to make myself less important. If you've ever read the E-Myth, it's like the goal there is how do you make yourself the least important part of your business, which is very different from how I spent the first 10 years building my business. I was trying to make myself the most important thing. And along with that came a decision about, okay, well, if we're not going to be Mortgages by Dion anymore, then what are we going to do? So we rebranded, and with branding, there's lots of ideas around that. I don't think there's any exact science, but I said to myself, what's easy to remember and has some kind of connection to me. So I grew up in Australia, and everybody knows animals are like the easiest thing that most humans remember. Right. So I said, okay, well, what are the animals available? There's enough mooses and
there's a lot of killing. There's a lot of terrifying animals in Australia. Let's be honest.
That's right. I chose one of the apparently kangaroos can kill you, but
I think
so I went with Kanga Mortgage. It's a funny name, but people seem to remember it, and they certainly remember the image.
And you have that fantastic accent. So then any of your branding or things you're talking about, we were chatting with this return the recorder. I was talking to Ron Butler about in Vegas, how you've got Celine Dion and you got the Blue Man Group. And Celine Dion, if she doesn't show up, the show doesn't happen. The Blue Man Group, they've swapped people out of that because they're all painted blue. You can't tell the difference. What you've done is you've taken your business from a Celine Dion model to a Blue Man Group model, where it's like, it's not about, or maybe like Cirque du Soleil, for instance, they swap out people all the time, but the show continues and you're able to. And so that's what you've been able to effectively do over the last couple of years, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And now, when people call, they're not asking for Dion, and for me, that's amazing, right? They're just asking for the person on the team who's looking after them at the time.
Right. Okay. So, what's your niche? And talk to me about when did you decide that this was going to be your niche? Because I know, and has it changed? Oh, because that's like multiple questions here. So maybe just go and I'll because I already know the answers to some of this. Yeah. So, but I'm leading you. Go ahead.
Sure. So. So my background, my passion, my interest was always in financial freedom. And that's what led me into real estate in the very first place. And so when I got into mortgages, I came to Canada having been invested in real estate and teaching other people how to become first-time investors into real estate from Australia. And when I came to Canada, I realized that, and I'm going to age me here, this is early 2008. I realized that at that time, real estate investing wasn't
that was actually that was a terrible market, though, by the way. That was like 2008, 2009. It was like we got kicked in the teeth, but
yes,
carry on.
It was the worst time to start in real estate or finance anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter where you are. But I came into that market, and what I quickly realized is, this is going to sound strange for listeners today, but you go back 15 years and you ask 100 Canadians, if I gave you 200 grand today, what would you invest in, right? Today, or in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, a lot of people would go into real estate. But back then, I would tell you that it was probably less than 10%, right?
I agree with you. I agree with that.
10% of people were investing money into real estate. And I said, this is such a missed market in Canada. And also, I came from Australia where every house is a single family home, and into Canada where every house can be a duplex or a double family home with that basement apartment. So I'm like, why aren't people doing this? And so I kind of made this my personal mission to show people why they should do this. And then the question was, well, how do I get them to understand this and how do I roll it out? I decided to target real estate agents because I didn't know anybody, but I knew the real estate agents had databases. And I said to these realtors, hey, listen, if you get me in front of your clients, I'll give them reasons to buy more real estate, which was, again, aligning, their incentive with my incentive. If you want to make money in this world, you got to find out how can you help others make money. And those others in my world are my real estate agent partners as well as their clients.
Right. And when I first met you and you showed me what you were doing, because you were doing like seminars to a booked call and we ended up, I think, called the Create 5, which was creating 5 deals from your realtor's database. And it worked like crazy. So it was at a time when a lot of people were looking at buying their first investment property. Rates were low. There was a lot of opportunity. And I won't get into that a ton right now, but so how has that changed, knowing that the market's not the same? And so like, how have you pivoted or adjusted given that, and just for the record, like maybe if you mind sharing, what was the peak year in production for you in that kind of what you were doing? Because, and again, I know the answers, but you should say it. So it's your podcast, not mine.
No worries.
It's your interview.
Yeah, in terms of what we were doing, I think there was one year where we hit about 190 million in volume. It was kind of crazy. I didn't sleep. I told my wife for a period of there, this year I can't be a husband or a father. I just got to work for a period of time. And thankfully, I have a very understanding wife who understands things in our business happen in cycles, right? But yeah, since then, we haven't been immune to what's happened in the economy with interest rates and truthfully, the robbing of confidence from Canadian consumers, right? The sentiment in the last couple of years has been somewhat survival mode. And I think you and I are similar, Scott, in that you and I thrive in environments where people are abundance minded, right? That the idea that tomorrow will be better than today is a given, right? That's kind of the world into which I choose to live every day. The challenge is when you're in an environment where everybody else is super impacted in the negative. In these last couple of years, we've had to go into a different category where it was, I call these last couple of years triage for the Canadian consumer, where we went from being in abundance, showing people how to build a better future for themselves, their families, etc., their retirement, to, okay, how do we hold on to what we have and make that monthly payment so that we can get through this storm, knowing that we're going to get through it, but we just don't know how long it's going to take. And so in this last couple of years, we've been doing a lot more of that type of business. On the positive side, because we've been working with people who historically were those future thinkers, they ended up having a larger asset base than your regular Canadian. And so they had the assets with which we could then plan, establish home equity lines of credit, other things like that. As well as, and interestingly, a lot of our clients on the path that they were on, they were fine and they were in an environment where they're trying to help their children. And so we actually were helping a lot of our investor clients help their children buy their first home in the last couple of years.
So you kind of moved into first-time buyers, not because it's your primary, like you didn't market specifically to first-time buyers, but these people who are the first-time investors or second-time investors, they're now, kids are getting older, and it's like, how do I help them? And so then it kind of created a natural market, a secondary kind of market for you. What percentage of your business would you say is, like in the last year, has been that first-time buyer compared to investor? Because
it's done like a 180 swing. So it used to be 80-20 in the investor direction, and now it's gone the other way. I'll correct that a little bit. We've had quite a bit of investor business from new construction, right? And this also has posed a major challenge in the last year.
Explain to me what you mean by new construction. Is it like condos that they're supposed to close on, or
condos,
is it
houses, townhouses? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So these are people who were originally approved by their bank at certain rates, and rates changed over time. And as those rates increased, they were no longer able to close on the mortgage that their bank had approved them at. And so they've come to us in order to be able to close on that property, not lose their deposit. And in many cases this year, we've been having to restructure existing assets, so refinance principal residence, also maybe get parents involved. I would say this is the year that I've had more people on a file than any other year in order to get that deal closed.
Right. Okay. So so now it's more they're not, it's 20%. What percent would be investor like triaging or problem solving for investors of your business right now? Would you say?
What's the question?
So at what percent, like it used to be 80% investor, 20% other when you.
Okay. Yeah. Probably it's now like 40% investor. Yeah.
Okay. So 60% sort of first time
buyer or just regular refi.
Right.
Is happening a lot more now.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And then, so have you had to do have you changed any of your marketing strategies given that your niche was it up until this point, up in the last couple of years, it's been investor?
Yeah, of course. Like you can't be deaf and blind to what's going on in the environment. And as much as I want to beat the drum of, property investing is going to help you in 10 or 20 years, people don't care about that when they're living in a state of fear right now. Right. So what you have to become, or what I became in this period of time, was somebody who was willing to just continue to put out information that was useful, not alarmist, but practical as well. I think in our industry, Scott, there's just you said this earlier, there's a lot of people who like using jargon, using industry terminology, and making themselves feel really important because they know these big words. And your clients don't give a damn about that. All your clients care about is what's going on, how does it impact me now, and how does it impact my future? And if every conversation you have in your day-to-day interaction with your client is with that in mind, then that's what continues to hold you in a certain level of at a certain level of importance in your client's eyes. So historically, I've been doing seminars, then webinars. Those webinars used to be investor focused. Now they've been very much, okay, what do you do right now? One of my seminars titles in the last year was something along the lines of prepare, protect, and prosper, right? So it came down to, okay, let's protect what we have right now. Hold on, and then we'll get through it, and we'll prosper on the other side of it. So yeah, you have to adjust that messaging. And it's been well received. We've got clients who have reached out saying, we've been watching you over the last 3-4 years, and now we're ready to move forward. And they've watched the good times and the bad times.
Right. And so prior to this switch, what percentage of your business was A versus B?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was likely, 80% A and 20% B. And now, yes, you are correct. We're probably around 40% B private and 60% A.
Yeah, I didn't know what the answer, but I was going to guess that the number of on the B side is expanded, and just given your client base. And so you've adjusted some of your marketing in terms of the messaging on seminars. Is there anything else that you found that's worked well, moving from primarily investor niche to the current market? What else has been working for you? Are you doing any social? Are you doing I haven't chatted with you in a while, so I'm curious.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram in a minor way. I haven't really blown up the Instagram really. I'm
trying, brother. I'm trying. It's hard.
Yeah. But what I can say is I was very fortunate that for the first 10 years in business, I just put my head down and networked like crazy. And I won the trust of hundreds of real estate agents. And when you win their trust, they share their databases with you so that I can encourage their database to buy. And now I have a very large database of people who we email on a regular basis, at least once a week, in terms of what's going on, a product that's come out that might help them, sharing real stories of people we've helped. And I find that if you just send out real stories of a person that you helped, that if you send it out to 100 people, probably 1 or 2 people go, oh, you know what? That looks just like me. And next week there's a different story, and it'll be 1 or 2 different people who that lands with.
Yeah. Remember Chet Holmes, The Ultimate Sales Machine, which is a fantastic book. I don't know if you've ever, anyway, he talks about whatever you're selling at any time, 3% of the market is what, like if it's tires, if it's
right,
they're like 3% of people want it right now. And so like, as you're saying, you send out that to a large enough list, there's a percentage of them that will say, that's my situation. And, okay. Talk to me about your team. So what, if you don't mind sharing, so what do you think your production will be around, but will you finish out this year at? And I want to ask you about your team structure.
Yeah, look, it's been a skinny year. I think we're going to end up at somewhere around 80 million.
Okay.
And in terms of team, so my wife and I are the founders. For anybody who is a broker and hates admin, I would say to you, the most important person in your world is the person who can do all this stuff that isn't mortgage brokering, right? So for me, that is my wife. She is effectively the general manager, and she doesn't do all the technical stuff, but underneath her, we've got an assistant and an office manager who handle most of the stuff, but she's the person who directs.
But she has in the past, and she's probably trained them, and she can.
Oh yeah. Back in the day, Scott, when we were working out of our basement, when we had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, right? Back then, she was doing all the fulfillment, right? She was that person. So she understands the business inside out. But yes, so she manages 2 people there. And then on my side, we have myself. I consider myself the sales team leader. And under me, we've got a salesperson, we've got an underwriter, and fulfillment. So, and that fulfillment person actually does the admin as well. So there's a little bit of cross utilization there. But that's the general picture there.
And then, so this, just so I think I understand this. So you or the salesperson would do that initial consult, and then
Well,
once you kind of
historically I was, but now I'm actually doing a lot less of that, and I'm doing more of the marketing focus.
Oh, okay. So tell me about how is that structured? So you're basically driving traffic to the machine, to the Kanga, and you got a salesperson who does the consult. Like where do they hand off to the underwriter and fulfillment and all that stuff?
Yeah, sure. So let me start off by saying a lot of mortgage teams will have like a team leader and then 10 or 15 selling agents, similar to I guess your BRX over there, Scott. I used to work in that model, and I used to be that team leader, and I felt like I was babysitting 15 people at once, and it was just too much for me. So what I decided was I would build a system that was kind of upside down, where effectively every deal was my deal, and I would look at or touch the deal, but I wouldn't do every piece of the 100% of the deal, right? And so I built and modeled off effectively a mortgage factory where this thing gets put on a conveyor belt and a certain person does a certain thing at a certain time. So my job is to drive the business in, right? So my business is really relationship management, writing up those emails. And I don't know if you know this, but like copywriting isn't a piece of cake, right? It requires, okay, what message do I want to get across? I might end up with a 5-sentence email that might have taken me 2 hours to write. And some of you listening might go, that's insane. But the thing is, it's about how do you say this in such a way that people are going to respond and actually.
Copywriting there's an art to it. How big is your list?
Somewhere around 8,000. Yeah.
Right.
So
okay, so so the messaging matters. If you get the right messaging, the conversion of a 0.5% or 1% can make a big difference in response rate on 8,000 people.
Exactly. Yes. And then it's also, so it's the emailing, the technical stuff, but it's the warm stuff, which is also just calling our realtor network and our referral network and saying, hey, how's the market? What are you seeing at the moment? Here's what I'm seeing. And remaining top of mind with those people who, in good or bad times, need to remember you. And I'll tell you that some of my top performing realtors pretty much disappeared in terms of volume over these last couple of years. But as rates have turned, they're back in the saddle, and we're talking and we're transacting a lot more. And it's because they remembered that during these 2 years, I was the guy who continued to call them when everybody else sort of was their lone wolf and just sort of survival of the fittest.
Left them alone. Thing. Right. Okay.
So
okay, I got to come back. I love this. So you basically you do the marketing, then the salesperson. What do they do in the process? And because this is not the same, you and I've chatted about this numerous times, but your model has evolved and you've experimented over time. So you got this salesperson. What do they do, and when do they hand off to the underwriter?
Yeah. So so the lead comes in. The appointment is usually set in the schedule of our salesperson. Then we generally try and do that by a Zoom call, if it can be done, because in the absence of meeting in person, I still think that being able to physically see a person and connect at that level is still important, right?
Yeah.
Now, if it's just transactional, if it's like, what's your rate? I'm just refinancing and I don't need any new money, it's less important. But when it's, okay, what are we trying to do here? What problem we're trying to solve? So we get on a Zoom call. That's what we call our discovery call. After that, we take detailed file notes as if the next person I hand this file to needs to know everything about this client, right? So we have a long template that we created in terms of what we need. So that hits then the applications, we call them applications coordinator, office manager role. They then reach out to the client with the application and collect all the documents. So that is not the salesperson's job. That's an administrative task. Okay.
Yeah.
Once those docs are in, the admin person then hands that off to our underwriter. Okay. So our underwriter is not chasing paperwork. They are truly underwriting. So we're trying to get people to do the thing that they are the genius at most of the time, right? So our underwriter is not chasing upfront docs. He's basically handed a file with, here's what we're trying to do. Here are the docs. Can it be done? And then he'll underwrite. When that's done, he'll create a report to say, hey, here's what you said after the discovery call. Here's what's realistic. and 9 times out of 10 they match, and and then we'll have a secondary call, but that call is of course with the salesperson. So the client up front only sees the salesperson, and as far as that client knows, the work has been done by the salesperson. Not that we've told them that, but it's just that, okay, it's gone through the process. So that's where that handoff happens.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so do they ever talk to the fulfillment person, or is the fulfillment person just like digitally collecting documents? And
yeah, I mean, sometimes they are talking, yes, because you and I both know that down payment's not the easiest thing to explain over a phone call, so over an email. So certainly phone calls are required at times.
Right. And then with this model, how many files do you think you could fund in a month? Like reasonably, without having to add without having to build another leg or another.
We could probably.
And where would it break?
25
so many questions.
to 30 without going crazy. Yeah,
25 to 30 files a month, and then if you wanted to go to say 40 files a month, would you need to have like 3 new people, or where do you think it would break in this?
No, so it would likely be the underwriting and fulfillment that we would have to ramp up.
Okay.
Because that's the thing that takes the highest level of cognition, like focus time, and it might in fact be a fulfillment officer who can unburden a bunch of that other stuff from the documentation component, right?
Okay, so it wouldn't actually necessarily, like, your salesperson's not going to be the choke point in this whole thing. And
no,
so
to be clear, I'll jump on sales calls. I love sales, right? Mm-hmm. So if things were to ramp up and I had to get on a phone call 2 or 3 times a day, that's fun for me.
Right, I see. So that you've got some built-in
contingency.
What's the word? Contingency. What about redundancy? So what happens when your obviously you can cover the salesperson. What happens when your fulfillment or underwriter wants to go on vacation?
Yeah, so we've had that. We've had parental leave and those types of things. And so what we do is we do cross-train people. And when things are slow, we throw people into that other role to shadow that other person to see what they're doing. But we've got a team member who's going to be taking time off to spend with their newborn baby, and yeah, we kind of have some run up for that to say, okay, here's what's going to happen in those couple of weeks, and how we manage it. So it is, everybody's a specialist, but they need to know how to sit in that other seat temporarily.
Yeah, they need to have a second skill. It's sort of like you got the primary and the secondary skill, so that especially when you have a small team, you need redundancy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, back when it was just me and my wife, we controlled everything. We knew how to do everything. And now that I've made this goal to make myself redundant in terms of importance to the business itself, what I found is it's actually better to train other team members in those technical things. Like I used to underwrite 50 files a week, but now I'm trying not to underwrite, even though I can. I try, and it's like walking in the kitchen and there's too many cooks, and I've had to learn to let go. But yeah, cross training is really important, and trying to make it so that I'm not the most important part is still important.
Right. Okay. And then, so what do you do to keep all your files on track? Like what tools or software helps facilitate this whole thing? I remember I wouldn't say, like, at least from several years ago, I would say you were not using the most tools at the time. So, I mean, you had this one email you'd send out before they would talk to you that I was like, remember the one with the 50 questions, and people would fill it out. I'm like, you're sending like 25 questions to somebody before they even talk to you, and they will do it. Like, that was awesome. But what are you using now?
Yeah, so we use 2. Well, okay. I don't think that there's one particular program that works, right? We have to piece it together and make it work ourselves. So we use, on the front end, we use a thing called Go High Level, which is basically we use it like a prospecting CRM. It's supposed to be a lot more than that, but it doesn't do some of the functionality that the other deal flow CRM does, which is Django. So we use Django there for deal tracking. And then, of course, we use Velocity for submissions. So I know people listening will say, that's insane. Why do you have so many different things? And it's because one thing doesn't do the thing I need. So I have to go find the other thing that does the thing I need. And I probably only use 20 to 30% of each of those things. right?
But they are all specialized. You've got the submission, you've got the Jungo is really, and is Go high level for prospecting as well as database, or is Jungo doing your database marketing?
So it's Jungo that does the database market. Well, hang on. You're asking I think we're actually transitioning to Go high level. I think we are. Yeah. That's
okay.
That's ask Venmo question, Scott.
So I always think about it. There's actually 3 databases, if you will. There's before, during, and after. So there's what do you do with the prospects before? There's the during, which is, the file when you're working on the file and notifications. And then there's the after.
Yes.
And if you think of it that way, it's actually easier to then go, okay, what tool can I use and processes in the before that are going to make me not let anything slip through the cracks, make sure that I get everybody. What tool can I use in the during, like Jungo is great for that, or these other programs that can do the communication throughout the loan process, and then what comes at the back end. And so it sounds like that's what you're
pretty much. And I didn't think about it that way, but that's what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And then, so what does your day look like now? Now that you have what does your 9 to 5 look like, given you have a team that is designed to help you scale?
Yeah, so we're actually right now we're transitioning salespeople. So I've been back in the sales role for a little period here, but we've got a new salesperson starting. But what a regular day will look like is I make sure that that our calendar is booked, and if it's not booked, I find work for our salesperson to do in terms of outbound prospecting to our warm database. So I look for white space in the calendar and opportunities for us to be proactively reaching out if we don't have sales calls booked at that time. The other thing I'll do is I'll still look at files. I'll chat with the underwriting team and say, okay, what are the challenges you're having? I find my role in my business right now is let me take a step back. When you are a solo salesperson, your job is to look after your client, right? To get the best outcome for your client. When you become a team leader, you look after your team, and their job is to look after your client, right? So my job right now is to effectively clear all the obstacles that my team has on a daily basis. Be it a BDM who's giving us trouble, who's not calling us back because we asked for a rate exception. And now I have to call his manager and, poke them a little harder than we otherwise should. Or maybe a client is dragging their feet and we've got to close this file next week. And, I'm the one who can get a little bit more pushy than the rest of the team, because at the end of the day, it's my client, and my team will respectfully deal with my client. And sometimes I need to be a little bit more forceful with, conversations and language and that type of. When I say language, I don't mean swearing. I just mean pushing people to do things in the way that we need to get them done. So I'm kind of like the steamroller that clears the path for the team. And so it's just jumping into little situations here or there that will help my team, that will then help the clients and help the overall engine that is the business.
Right. So look for white space in the calendar, which is just a marketing function. That's where you're going to be doing either emails or talking to your prospecting, problem solving, and clearing paths for the team. That's like, I read a book recently called Crucial Conversations. If you haven't read it, it's really good. It's about how to have a challenging conversation when the stakes are high, emotions are high, and outcome matters. And so you have crucial conversations with team members as well as lender partners and clients in order to. Is there anything else that you do in your day?
Yeah, I mean, I try and stay relaxed, which is a funny thing. It's a funny thing to say, but it's like we're doing more deals than historically, before. But before I was super stressed because all the burden was on me, right? But now that burden is distributed, the only burden is payroll. And that's a burden that I can manage, if you know what I mean, right? I'd rather that burden than having, the 25 files that I got to close this month all by myself. So, truthfully, it's about staying healthy and staying to the point that my team can depend on me. That's like the most important thing, right? It's almost like being a parent, where you want your family to depend on you. You want your team to know that they can depend on you.
Right. That's really good. Okay. Can you talk to me about, are you still working remotely?
Yeah. So, I mean, I travel quite a bit, but yes, I bounce between countries. I don't know if I told you this a little while ago. I was in Australia, working from there, working from Canada. And right now I'm talking to you from Barbados.
Right. And so, how has working in Barbados been? Talking about that, because there's a lot of people listening, going, "Man, I'd love to be somewhere where it's not cold." And like, what's been your experience living there, running your business? First question, and second is having your family there too.
Yeah. So look, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to work out what's the business for? What the hell's the money for? And a lot of people just pursue money without having a really good vision of the life that they would create if they had that money. And I'm really fortunate that at the very early stages, before we had kids, my wife and I sat down and said, okay, what would that actually look like? And we actually, a lot of people talk about writing down those goals. What's that vision? What would your perfect day look like? We actually did that. We actually did that about 15, 16 years ago. And so everything we were doing was kind of moving towards this vision, not directly. Sometimes we'd go off at a tangent and we'd fall back on it. But once we hit certain numbers, it's like, okay, well, we're at a point now where we could actually do the things that we said that we wanted to do. And you know what usually happens then, Scott, with most people?
You reset the goal.
What's that? They reset the goal.
You just go, let's just go bigger. And you don't ever stop and go, what was the point? Yeah.
Exactly. And I know that I could have easily fallen into that trap where I could have said, you know what? I literally today I could be making double or triple the income that I'm making. That could have been a life choice for me. But I said, no, let's actually enjoy this life. And maybe I won't die the richest person in the world, but I'll die having lived a decent life. And so, that involved travel, right? I remember sitting down with my financial planner, 10 years ago. And he said he has a checklist of questions. And one of the questions was, okay, how much do you want to spend on travel per year? And my number was, I think it was $40,000. He looked at me and he went, are you serious? And I said, well, I have family who live in Australia, okay? And I have 4 people in my family. That trip alone is 20 grand, right? That's a 20 grand trip, whichever way you cut that. So one trip is like an obligation trip. Well, not that it's a huge, but you have to go see your family.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then if I want to have an actual holiday to break up winter or whatever, then I've got to have some money for that. So he looked at me like I had 2 heads, and I went, no, this is important to me. And so again, we just made it important. And so then it was like, okay, how do we potentially run our business while being remote for extended periods of time? And fortunately, with technology, even well before COVID, we were fully remote. Our entire team was fully remote well and truly before COVID. Clients didn't care. Clients were at a point where, if it's a choice between sitting in traffic and coming to an office, or just meeting me online or meeting a client on a team member online, they chose that anyways. And COVID put fuel on the fire where nobody ever wants to meet anymore, right? They're just like, why the hell would we do that? It's either a phone call or a video call. And it's all doable. Whether I'm standing in Toronto or in Brisbane, Australia, or in the Caribbean, it doesn't matter as long as the work gets done.
Right. That's really good. And so what is your family, because you've been down there for a bit, at least, I don't know for how long at a time, but how's your family like living in, a tropical paradise?
Well, look, I was born in Fiji and I grew up in Australia. So when I look around, I wake up every day, I look outside, I see a palm tree and blue skies, and I'm in my element. And truthfully, I think that if kids can run around barefoot for as long as possible, that's a good childhood. And my kids are 10 and 12 and they're still running around barefoot. And it's really a sense of community here. And things feel like they did in Australia 30 years ago. And Australia has since advanced. So it's a little bit slower paced. Education system is amazing. It's sun shining 300 days a year.
That's so awesome. Okay, so this is awesome, man. Thanks for chatting with me. Where can people find you online if they're looking for you?
Yeah, kangamortgage.ca or Instagram at the Dion Beg.
And it's Kanga with a K.
You got it.
Hey, thanks again for listening, and hopefully you're inspired by my conversation with Dion. I know that I always am when I chat with him, and I always leave fired up. And, you think about this, what would your mortgage business look like if you actually had this as a model to copy, I want to be the guy who drives the marketing, or the girl or the person that does the marketing. And then I have my team in place. And I just think that this is a fantastic model, especially people who have established businesses and databases. And we had talked about this after, I think we turned off the recorder, but the burnout rate is very high in the mortgage business. After, a decade, people tend to be like, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing this. But if you build a business that properly, you actually don't have to burn out from it because you're not doing it all yourself. Anyways, hope you find this conversation to be valuable. Thanks again for listening. I'm Scott Peckford. And as I always say, there's no problem in your mortgage business someone else hasn't already solved. Your problem is who's got the answer. Hopefully this podcast provides you some of those answers. Thanks for listening. And I will see you on the next episode.